big long vacation. So tonight we're having a process session. I'm going to turn it over to City Manager.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and yes, welcome back. It was a great summer, so it's great to see everybody back. We'll start off. I'll turn over to Mia and her team to kind of work through some items that have come up over the last many months. And, you know, periodically we have process sessions with the council, and they really are concerning your operating procedures and administrative kinds of things. And so this is an opportunity to get your direction or decisions on a few things. So, Mia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And before Beth and I get started, I'll just point out that we have a new sound system and a new projector in the room. So I think the improvement to sound quality is obvious, but I hope you do too, and I hope folks at home do.
Did we get new speakers back there? Is that what?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. Glad to hear it.
We'll pass that on to the county. So during this work session, we are going to tee up a number of topics for you to discuss. First, we have some informational items to share, and we're not looking for any direction related to those. But council communication work session, so a work session specifically about council communication, has been scheduled for September 28th. And while many of the pieces that we'll touch on today do relate to communications, we're not going to try and capture everything today, but we do have a few things that we want to share with you. One of those is our new webcast system, which is available for this very meeting. So we'll show you what that looks like and tell you more about that functionality. And then we want to share with you the process for public records requests. Some of you are familiar, but we wanted to make sure you know how that works because we often hear about that from the public. We will be asking for feedback on meeting minutes. We'll be looking for some general direction from you so that we can come back later with some specific asks. And finally, we want to affirm your intention for a workshop in early calendar year. So this is what our new webcast module looks like. With this functionality, folks can access our webcasts and meeting materials from mobile devices and Macs. So previously, you could only get meeting materials and watch webcasts from personal computers, and so we now have the ability to, our folks now have the ability to use their mobile devices. We know we've been waiting for this for a long time, and so a huge thanks to CMO staff that worked on this and our ISD staff.
Landed in the modern age.
We have. So here's what it will look like when folks call it up. Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, if you're on the phone, you can follow along now.
Dedicated Mac guy.
That's right. So this is what the system looks like if you call it up on either your PC or your phone, and you can expand the actual webcast so that it uses the entire screen. But what's really neat is that the meeting materials are available just below. So if you're following along in the meeting, you can watch the meeting and access the meeting materials at the same time. And I will email you the link to this later so that you can share it as you'd like. And that's all on the webcast update.
I'm sorry, so I'm seeing that as a video link that's coming through. Are those going to be then kept for a longer period of time now as a record? I know Metro TV keeps a short time span, but that looks like it's on YouTube as a live cast. Is that correct?
Right, so YouTube is the system in the background that allows us to do it.
So it will be archived for how long?
Forever.
Okay, excellent.
Yep.
Till the earthquake that crushes City Hall. Crushes YouTube.
Don't get me started, brother. It's early.
So before we talk about the process for public records requests, we want to remind you of the other ways in which we share records with the community. There is a computer in the city manager's office that can be accessed by the public, and all of the emails that you receive as a group are available there for anyone to view. And as a side note, last time we counted, you received over 3,500 in 1 year. So there's a lot of content if anyone chooses to come look at that. Other city offices keep budget documents and all of our plans and policies available at the library or at the front counter at finance and in the community centers. Our website is, of course, a resource. We have a multitude of interested parties email distribution lists that we regularly send information to. And then, of course, if we have documents readily available, we pass those on as folks request them. So when the public cannot access records using one of these methods, we often get public records requests. And you may recall that there was a story in a local publication recently about the turnaround time associated with public records requests. And we do find that the public can sometimes be frustrated with the time it takes to put those documents together. So we just want to let you know what this process entails so you have a better sense of why that can happen. So we receive a request at the city manager's office and we confirm receipt, which we're legally required to do. And often the request that comes in is pretty vague. And so there's some back and forth between CMO staff and the person requesting the documents to make sure we understand what they're asking for. So that can take anywhere from 1 day to 1 week. We then work with department staff to develop a cost estimate. We're required to charge for anything that isn't readily available. And so we reach out to departments and ask them to estimate the time it will take for them to put the information together. And then we wait for the payment to be received. At that point, someone can choose to not move forward with the request if it's a cost that they're not willing to pay. So that can take anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks. Then the city recorder, either Chuck or Beth, reach out to staff and the mayor and council to actually locate and submit the documents. And this is a pretty time-consuming process. It takes anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks, depending on the nature of the documents and the number of people involved in the request. So that's a significant variable. And then finally, once all of the documents have been submitted to the CMO, we finalize them and we let the requester know that they're available to come pick up. That can take anywhere from 1 day to 1 week. Yes.
Under the heading of staff and mayor and council, locate and submit relevant documents, that's happened a few times, but where someone wanted to see our private emails containing certain words, any of our emails to anybody, and is that what that refers to?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, so any private emails that pertain to city business.
Yeah, if
Right.
there's any relevant materials in your private emails. Yeah.
And any emails that are sent to the mayor and council email group, staff is responsible for.
Mike?
Yeah, when you say private emails, do you mean in that particular case, and I'm just reviewing where Glenn is in the room, that refers to our individual city address or to any email address that we control?
I would use different words.
Okay.
So a private email is an email that you are not sending or receiving in your capacity as an elected official. It doesn't matter what email address it goes to. So if somebody sends to you, Mike, at your business email, at your personal email, something that relates to city business, the way I would use the terms, it's not a private email, it's a public email. And so it doesn't matter the address, it only matters whether you are sending or receiving it in your capacity as an elected official. If you are, it's a public record for purposes of the Public Records Act. It doesn't necessarily mean that the public gets it, because it could be something coming from me and so is exempt under attorney-client or some other exemption. But when CMO staff ask you to search, it's really sort of your personal email, then that's what we're seeking is, did you get or did you send something on a personal email account? As Mia said, if it goes, I mean, most of the emails you get go to you as mayor and council, and so we have access to those. What we don't, I think, have access to are emails that are emailed individually to even your city email address, and we certainly don't have access to emails that were sent to you at some other email address, but happens to include public business.
Thank you, sir.
Greg?
So Mia, as far as cost estimates, what are the minimum and maximum ranges to that, depending upon the complexity of the request? So for instance, recently I know that the county had some issue with someone who had come from out of state who wanted a certain set of documents related to personnel matters. And I know that the state of Oregon has a fairly liberal policy in the ORS rules around disclosure of, public employee kinds of records requests, but there's certain things that have to be redacted. I would assume that there is additional cost to redacting certain portions of records requests and other things that come up like that. So, just given an example, not specifically a set policy, but what kind of ranges are we talking about in terms of costs? Because I know that very often people will complain to us that they will say, we've asked for these particular records and they cost X amount of money, and that's cost prohibitive, and it's keeping, it's a way for, the government, quote unquote, to avoid disclosure in terms of revealing and turning over public records.
So let me take a crack at that one, Greg. The cost is dependent on the number of records that need to be redacted. So, for example, if somebody asked for all of the information that the city has related to elected officials' personal lives, home addresses, if we have your social security numbers, whatever it is, if they asked for that, it wouldn't take us very long to redact that information because there are only 9 of you. If somebody said, we would like all of the information that the city has related to every employee for the last 10 years, then we have thousands of bits of information we'd have to go through, certainly redact social security numbers. In many cases, we would actually have to redact everything because there are other statutes that say certain information can't be released, for example, on public safety officers. So it really depends on the nature of the request. Oftentimes what we'll do, and you heard Mia reference it, is if somebody makes a really broad request, we'll try to work with the requester to say, it's going to cost you an awful lot of money and take us a lot of time to try to get the information given the way you have described it. Is there something more specific? Tell us what you're really trying to get at, and we might be able to help you reframe your request so either it doesn't cost you anything at all and we can produce it in a day, or sure, that we can provide it will take 2 hours of our time and cost, I'm not sure what our charge is these days, but less than $100 to do that. But yes, we do get to charge for redacting. Our goal is to get the requester to narrow the request to a point where the requester gets the information that they really want. It doesn't cost them a lot of money. Many times we'll at least suggest, why don't you narrow the request? We'll give you that information, and if you decide that doesn't really answer your question, you can certainly then broaden the request, and then we'll tell you how much that costs.
Continue.
Okay. So that's all on public records. Last spring, during your conversations with the budget committee, interest was expressed in looking at bringing back more detailed meeting minutes, and then once since. And so today we'd like to get direction on where you'd like to head, and then we'll bring back specifics with the first supplemental budget in December, if necessary. So currently, this is our meeting minutes practice. Minutes are the responsibility of CMO staff and the city recorder specifically. And at this point, we write minutes in a way that meet basic state requirements. And so that consists of meeting location, date, time, who is present, actions and motions, and then a really high-level summary of the conversation. Because of that summarized version, those are usually available for your approval the next week, so very quick turnaround time. And then, of course, detail is always available via webcast. This is a range of proposals to meet what we think we've heard your interest to be, and we wanted to bring back options that let you look at various levels of minutes that could be provided. So in the first column, the $0 to $25,000 range, that would allow us to maintain that quick turnaround time of around 1 week. And option A would come at no additional cost and be provided by our current closed captioning contractor. So they currently provide closed captioning services for webcasts, and that is a verbatim transcript. And so if you've watched a meeting from home, running across the top of the screen, there is somebody listening and transcribing that as you go. This option would be a verbatim transcript of that, and so it could include mistakes or the ums and ahs as you speak.
I've got Mike in the queue and then George. Mike?
You're kind of getting to the answer to what I was going to mention previously, but my question was going to be whether any other capture of official business was done other than on YouTube and on their servers, only because it's a private company, and I doubt YouTube's going anywhere anytime soon, but it's still disconnected, and if it's the only place that the record exists, that would be I would think it would be wise to keep a backup of that somewhere. So it seems like maybe if we're going to have a verbatim capture, that might take care of it. So.
Okay, and just to get back to that, so I can check in with ISD staff. They did address that question when we had it, but I don't remember the specifics.
Okay.
George?
Well, my ideal would be D. Detailed minutes is provided prior to change in practice. I don't know that that's really necessary, though. I mean, it seems like A and B would be. Let's look at number A. That's the most cost modest, because it wouldn't cost anything extra. When you say verbatim closed captioning transcript, does that mean a printed copy that would be delivered in our packets?
It could be. It
Or
would
does that just mean from watching on the webcast?
It basically takes what you see on the webcast and we'd put it into a Word document.
Okay.
We would still produce the minutes as we do today to meet legal requirements. That would just be an addition to the minutes in the form that we currently produce them.
Could that document that would be produced, could that be included in our packets, printed out,
Yes.
included in our packets? Mm-hmm. Well, I think we ought to go that way, because it's not going to cost, it may cost a little bit more though, right, to do the printing and,
It would be extremely minimal. Our contractor has indicated that they could provide that pretty easily and at no cost.
I think that's probably the way to go then. Try that and see, try and see how that works, if people are satisfied with that, because then counselors, then it's, it'd be available in the city manager's office along with the rest of the packet. It would be available online. It would be, counselors would be able to have all of their minutes arranged in their office, all in order. I've found it enormously useful to go back and look and see what people have said, staff and other counselors. And to see what I said a couple of times too. I wasn't sure if I was presenting something, correctly, I wanted to see if I made any errors in my presentation. So, I don't know. Option A looks pretty good.
One clarification related to option A is that because it's verbatim, it wouldn't attribute comments to specific people. So it would just be a running conversation.
So you wouldn't know who was making the comment?
No.
Oh, well, no, you have to know that.
Yes. So if we continue and look at option B, that would be a verbatim transcript and then cleaned up. So we would correct typos, and we could, in that option, attribute comments to specific people. That would also require that we keep our current minutes to meet legal requirements.
Well, now B sounds better, because if you don't know who said what, that's the whole point of the minutes. So A is no good. Yeah. B seems, still cost effective. 25,000, less than 25, that's really not very much money, I think, for the benefit that it would provide. So B, you would know, it would be verbatim, cleaned up, and then there would be attribution of the remark.
To the degree.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's what I was getting at when I brought this up during the budget stuff anyway. So that might be the way to go.
Well, I'll continue walking through these and then we can, okay.
So I have 3 other people waiting in the queue. Do you want to finish and then have me call
We
them?
can just quickly finish up. And
I think that makes sense. And I just want you to know that I've got Chris and Alan and Betty in the queue. We'll go back to you as soon as she finishes the presentation.
So looking at the second column in the $25,000 to $100,000 range, this would be a longer turnaround time because it would require significantly more work. If we look at option C, that would replace our current minutes and the way that you approve them. This would be a greater summary, it'd be more detailed summary than you currently receive. And the content would be synthesized, so there'd be much more context provided than option B would allow for. This would likely require that somebody sit in the room or watch the meeting live and then take minutes, clean them up, provide a high-level summary, include actions and motions, and make all of those clear. Option D in the $100,000 range would also replace our current minutes. This would be much like minutes as you used to know them prior to the elimination of the minutes recorder positions, and they'd be very detailed, and you'd know who said what. They'd include actions and motions and much greater detail in the summary portion of the minutes. That's all we have on meeting minutes, and we can come back to that. So as the last item in this
Let me
piece-
ask
sure.
questions first.
Sure.
Okay.
Do you want to pass that?
Okay. And then we'll finish up, but let's
Okay.
finish this section. So Chris and then Alan and Betty and then George Poland. Chris?
Yeah, I think the approach that I'm taking to this is what kind of minutes are the most useful, and useful in what way. I think being able to watch a actual video broadcast is great in that you can hear tone of voice, you can see body language, and you get the exact words that are said. So when I think of the word verbatim, there's really nothing more verbatim than actually watching a broadcast. And so for me, actually having a transcript is not more helpful than watching the video, in that a transcript, and I've read a lot of transcripts, 2 minutes worth of conversation can be a full page in a transcript easily, which means a 2-hour meeting is suddenly a 60-page transcript. That's not helpful to me. I don't want to have to wade through 60 pages to find what was talked about. On the other hand, the current minutes are not useful because they don't have the level of detail that I would be looking for. So I'm trying to go for something in between. The minutes that we used to have, what you have up there in D, I found extremely useful because they were short enough to not have to wade through 60 pages, but there was a sufficient level of detail there that I could find substance about what was being talked about. So like George, my ideal would be D, go back to the way it was, because I found those minutes very useful. If we can't do that, then I'm willing to look at option C, where we can get at least some additional level of detail in the minutes, more than there is now, because what there is now is just, it's not enough. I couldn't go back to those minutes and really get a sense of what we talked about. So maybe figuring out, and you could bring this back to us, what the synthesis might look like. I will still have the verbatim, video to watch if I really need to exactly hear what I said and how I said it. But I don't want to wade through 60 pages of verbatim transcript, because that's not going to be any more helpful than watching a 2-hour video. So I'm looking for somebody to synthesize, not synthesize to the point of not being useful, but synthesize to the point where myself or even anybody else in the public, and the yardstick maybe 10 years from now, because I was trying to look for something back in 2010, and the minutes back in 2010 were good. I found exactly what I wanted, and it wasn't a verbatim transcript, but there was sufficient detail for me to be able to find what I needed. So that's what I would encourage you to explore. How can we make those minutes meaty enough for me to find what I'm looking for, but not try to create a verbatim 60-page transcript that I would also have a hard time getting through.
Alan?
Yeah, which one of those ones would be searchable on a particular topic or by a particular council or on a particular day, for instance?
So we use Laserfiche, which is searchable. Any of those would eventually become a Laserfiche record and be searchable by keyword.
So I could look up fireworks ban, and all of a sudden, everything would pop up related to fireworks. Every instance.
Yes.
You could go and read it. So, what is our webcast searchable? I have seen in other cities where they had the document searchable, where you looked at the agendas and you found what you wanted to do by searching on that, and then it said go to this webcast, and it brought you to the webcast, and you could listen to it.
If the work session title included the keyword you were looking for, it would come up. This functionality, the new webcast format, is new to us, so we can look into what that might entail.
Because if that were the case, then you could actually just go listen, or search it and listen to it.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I can't remember the last time I actually read detailed minutes, and every time I want to go back, I always go back and look at the video of it because it's so much easier for me to do that. And so I'm kind of wondering also, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? George talked about cost effective. I'm wondering how many people are going to use these detailed minutes. If we spend a lot of money on them, how many people, are 5 people going to use it, or 5,000? That's a big difference. So I'm wondering, what's the problem we're trying to solve by doing this?
That's a rhetorical to us, right?
No, I'm serious. I'm
But only, and I'm not trying to be facetious, because it came up as part of the budget committee. There was some conversation at the budget committee, and then subsequent, I think council asked some additional conversation on this, and so I guess we would put it back into the council's purview.
I didn't mean to throw it back on
Yeah.
staff. Maybe some counselors can eliminate it for me what the problem is that we're trying to solve.
Maybe someone, but I would just say myself that different people have different ways of accessing information. And aside from this group being able to access, you really are trying to make something that anybody can access, no matter what skills they have or don't have. So I think it's a transparency for the public, and it's a way for, should you need to, for you to be able to check on the history of something that we've been working on and has some accuracy. Some people, like you, would be enough to go back and watch the session, and others would like a different way of accessing that information. But that's just my opinion. Betty, and then George, and then second round.
Thanks. When we used to have minutes, sometimes I found errors and brought them up when we were asked to approve them. And I found them useful, but they're not just for the council, as you pointed out, they're for the public too. The webcast I find really frustrating. Sometimes it stops right in the middle, and frequently it stops right in the middle. And then sometimes it goes, if you try to click on something else, it goes back to the very beginning, and I don't want to watch what I already watched. I don't know if it's going to be improved or not, but it hasn't worked well at all. And someone said once that it's because the county meetings take precedence and ours are cut off when their program starts. I don't know if that's still true or not.
Metro TV covers the entire meeting, covers the entirety of each council meeting, and I think you'll find with the new system it is much easier to move around a meeting. doesn't include the forward 15 seconds or forward 30 seconds. You can actually just slide the timer to the point at which you want to watch the meeting. Should be much better.
Yeah, well, maybe it'll be better than it was, but I got really frustrated with, last time I tried something and I saw the mayor welcoming people over and over. It just kept going back, and I thought, you already did that. That's enough. But I really like the minutes that we used to have, but maybe the webcasts will work if it's works better than it does now, than it has worked. Thank you.
Councillor Polling.
Yeah, my question was about the formatting of the new webcast. The way it is currently can be difficult at times to watch the meetings, but I was able to find things that I was interested in looking back up, but this sounds like it's going to be a better system. You know, the detailed minutes, since we quit doing that, our council packet weight has probably dropped 15 pounds. So, and it was time consuming to go through and read those, but you know, I think we should maybe hold off making a decision until we see how this new webcast works, to see if it's easier to get through, to pull up information. Without seeing it operate, I don't know, but I wouldn't, for the time being, I think we should, you know, give it a while to get it up and running, get all the bugs worked out of it, and see how easy it is to retrieve information off that before we make another decision.
I've got Mike and then George Brown and then Greg.
Thank you. Going back a little ways, because I want to take off on something Alan said. The packet materials that you'll be able to peruse while watching the YouTube video. What's the formatting for the materials? Is it a projected? Is it a PDF that's projected? Okay. My question then will be around cost, because I really like Alan's idea, and it's not complex to do, and I can do it, but somebody else could do it much faster than me. It'll just require that they write down the time code at the point where in the agenda where the topic switches, and code that on the PDF so that it's a link. So all they have to do is click on it, and it takes you to that place in the video. It jumps you to there. And so I would wonder, that's going to require somebody to watch the thing and write down the time code and then go in and do the coding. But I wouldn't think it would take very long. So that's my question, is the cost to do that. And if it's minimal, I'd be in real favor of that. It would help people who weren't at the meeting watch the part they want to see more effectively.
Okay, George Brown.
Well, another topic that was brought up at the Budget Committee by me and by Councilor Syrat were minutes of the CRB meetings, which we should discuss. Maybe did you prepare any background information on that?
Well, any of these options for changing the way in which we conduct meeting minutes would be applicable, scalable to, we could include any of these options to cover other meetings.
It's been a while since I've been to a CRB meeting. Unfortunately, there's been a series of conflicts month after month for me. Are they on Metro TV?
They're not.
I don't think that they're broadcast, are they?
They are not.
No, they're not recorded. Well, I think my concern and Councilor Syret's concern was that there's no recording whatsoever. There's no record at all. So, and the idea was to correct that and have some kind of a record similar to wherever we land on the council meetings. So I just wanted to remind everybody of that. And
I know there was an issue about things that are discussed by the CRB that have particular names and situations that are not supposed to be made public. So if the decision was to go to some kind of record, it would require going through it to make sure those privacy requirements are taken care of. And that may not be very satisfying to the people who really do want to know everything, but we do have to, I think, obey the law in that regard. So that just complicates it a little bit, George, as all as.
Well, my guess is Oregon record laws are so strict, public record laws are so strict, unlike Ohio's, which are very broad. And I mean, the difference is like night and day. But they could be redacted before, you know. So, and I imagine the redaction, just guessing, would be minimal because the CRB and the auditor now are very familiar with public record restrictions. And so, yes, every once in a while a name might slip out, but it could be redacted. And usually it's something that's involving a case that's being tried in the courts or something like that. Or an internal investigation at the police department. They can't have information. I mean, they do in Ohio, but here, no, you can't do it. So, but anyway, I think that we need to drill down a little more on this and have some kind of a record from the CRB meetings.
Greg?
Thanks, Mayor. So in your research in there, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but are there specific software applications that are now in play by other agencies within the state, across the country, that, you know, capture this data in a way that is more fiscally efficient? And if so, in your research, what are the names of those applications and what do they do specifically in terms of that? Or is that even, have we even gotten to that point? I think we have in some respects. I know there's a lot of, you know, people that are, you know, hacking and doing other things that, and coding that are sometimes in advance of all kinds of public agencies, but is there any specific piece there? And then the second part of my question would be in terms of storage. So I know that we can, you know, you can load us up in terms of, you know, the PDF stuff in Dropbox. Would that constitute maybe an expansion of our Dropbox capabilities in terms of, you know, storing that data, and then, you know, we can cycle data out as we, you know, see that, you know, it's not applicable and it's stored in another place where we can access it when we need it.
I'll answer the software question first, and then Beth can speak to Dropbox. So we do know that software exists that could record meetings and then transcribe them. We haven't looked into that in detail. So we can do that once we have some additional direction.
So then once we give you additional direction, then you'll go into a deeper dive of what that software is and what those applications are out there. Because I would assume that there are other cities, counties, you know, state legislatures that are using some forms of these because of the level and volume of, you know, minutes that they generate.
We need to look into that.
Okay.
We haven't yet.
That could possibly save us more money, possibly.
And our use of Dropbox is pretty limited. Not everybody is on it. It's all internal. We could certainly look into using it more extensively.
Well, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, instead of, you know, of us having basically and like what we have now, but maybe a little more extensive in terms of our weekly packets, but that the majority of the most detailed information could be delivered via Dropbox. And then we could access it that way instead of, you know, our delivery crew, you know, hauling around, you know, pounds and pounds of paper and, you know, really killing our climate recovery ordinance at the same time. So, you know, there are ways for us to, you know, facilitate what we want to do, create the kind of transparency that I believe, if I recall correctly at the budget committee meeting, that we wanted to create, because I know that a number of people asked for and have over time more transparency in terms of the level of minutes that we have and that we're able to, interface with the public.
Chris?
Okay, then this has been great. So back to the notion of usefulness again. I love the idea of being able to take the recording and either make it timestamp and keyword searchable. Would be very cool. That would solve my need, because then I could go to the recording, say, look for everything related to this particular idea, and it would take me right to it. That, boom, we're solved. You could then maybe keep the minutes the way they are, maybe just make them a little bit more substantive, but not a lot, not to run up a big cost. But also, I think the notion that the videos would be more easily accessed and used by the general public, because if that's going to be their primary tool for watching our work, then we need to make sure that it's readily, easily accessible and readily and easily usable, including the timestamping and keyword searching. So whatever investigating you need to do there. So if I were giving you direction, I would say, yeah, let's start seeing what technology is available to make the recording as accessible and as usable as possible. Because there may be a way to do that very cost effectively. And it's not lost on me that we're moving into the 21st century, and that probably is where things are going to need to be. And reducing weight, I think, is a great thing. Since I've been getting my minutes in PDF form, my packets have declined substantially. I would have filled 3 filing cabinets with paper, and now all the minutes I've had since 2007, I started getting them, fit on one little jump drive. So that's a huge savings in space.
I was just listening to everybody. Number one is, I think if you would, every counselor should try the new website and see how it functions. And maybe there's, I don't know if you've already done it, whether you've had a small group of citizens try it to see how it works for them. I'd suggest that, because we want both kinds of access to know that it really is functioning the way we hope it's functioning. And then I do support the least paper concept. And so I think looking at how we can use the least paper, but that's probably still means we at least at the library or the CMO and other places need to have places for people who don't, who may need some help to have that access. And that would be part of where we can steer people to go if they can't readily do that. And other than that, I think that word and time accessibility is really, sounds really smart to me too. Yeah. Yes, Alan?
Yeah, I've seen other cities where they stamp it, and you can click on the agenda item and it'll bring you to the video, and you can fast forward it to the middle of it or whatever, and it's very, very easy to be able to work with that. I forgot what I was going to ask the second question.
It's okay.
I'll think of it in a minute.
All right. I think do you have enough information on this particular piece?
Maybe I can just try to summarize a little bit. So what I'm hearing is not verbatim minutes, regardless of how those get created or whether they have mistakes or not. There's an interest in this timestamp, cross-referencing agendas and or minutes, and that the minutes may be a little beefier than they are now, but not sort of where they used to be. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? And that they're available electronically, but we also make them available or easily available in print form, because not everybody has access to all the technology that's able to do all of this in real time. And so I think we do want to be conscious of that as well. So is that generally what people are thinking about? And then we can look at softwares, we can look at what it takes to actually produce all of that and come back and let you know what we're doing and see how that works for you.
And maybe the next time we have this discussion, we can start it off with hearing about what people's experiences with the new website.
Right, that would be helpful also.
Yeah.
Oh, Well, and one other thing, and I think that this would be helpful, is if we all, and maybe that's not what, I don't want to speak for any other counselor here, but what would be helpful for me is to, just have everything delivered via Dropbox, so there's two pieces of format that I can access. I can access the Dropbox on my computer, and then I've also got my dinosaur copy that I can deal with each week, but that it's real helpful to be able to go back and forth with those two mediums.
So for example, is it that like all the material gets posted on one place that the public and or council can reference it, whether it's Dropbox, or I don't know technology, so whatever that is.
Yeah, in the technology
As
realm.
opposed to individual Dropboxes that we're dropping everything into. It could be a common site that the public also has access to.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, anybody can go in and pull that out who has the technology, or if they don't have the technology, then there's a place that they can reference to access hard copies vis-a-vis the city manager's office.
Yeah, okay.
Alan?
My question that I just remembered was, what is exactly that we are doing, maybe this is for Glenn, what is it exactly we are doing when we improve the city council minutes? Are we
Approving them, not improving them, right?
what? I mean, as opposed to like, sometimes we get.
That's what confused me at first.
I know, I thought you said improve.
Approve. So sometimes we accept reports, and other times we approve them. So what are we doing when we are, it's always in the consent calendar, for instance.
You are putting your official stamp on those minutes as that is what happened at the council meeting.
Official record.
And so if somebody wanted to say, let's say there's litigation about what the council did or did not do, somebody would be able to take those officially approved minutes and say, Judge, here's those minutes, the council has approved them. And so that must have been what happened. Now, given today's technology where there's also a videotape, then it would be possible to introduce the videotape and say, actually, the minutes got it wrong. But it's much easier, for all the reasons you have just talked about, to introduce a page or two, or however many pages it is, of the minutes. So when you draft minutes have no legal significance because it's simply staff's attempt to tell you what we think happened at your meeting. It's not at all official. After you approve them, you have said, yes, that's what's happened. And so that becomes a legally significant document.
Because our minutes usually have topic, tiny little discussion, and then the verbatim motion and the direction, and then what the vote was, and that, I guess, is the important part. Those are always very clear to me. So I don't know that we're actually approving the minutes if they're wrong, and then they can go back and watch the video. Then the video is going to rule. If there's a conflict.
I'm not sure that any court, at least in Oregon, has had the opportunity to deal with that. So I'm just giving you my estimate as to what a judge might do in the event there was a conflict. There have been times in the past where minutes did not actually accurately reflect what was in the ordinance, and the ordinance controlled in that case. And the judge accepted that the ordinance controlled, but that was also an officially approved document that the council passed by motion and that the mayor actually signed. So I'm guessing as to what a court might do if there was a conflict between your minutes and the videotape.
So when our many boards and commissions approve their own minutes, they're doing the same thing?
Correct.
Even if they're in summary fashion?
Yes, and so there are certain...
None of them have verbatim.
And that's not required under state law. So under state law, there are certain things that have to be in minutes, which are those things that are actually in what you're calling the summary form of our minutes. There's nothing in state law that precludes as lengthy minutes as you want, but there are certain things that either have to be in those minutes, or in lieu of minutes, you can have an official recording. It doesn't need to be a videotape. It can just be an audio recording. We have both. We have the videotape, and then we have the summary minutes.
It's like the ref and the replay. But the ref,
No, so we're good? Okay, anything else?
I don't think so. Not on this topic.
Next topic.
Okay, so the final topic, your annual goal-setting session, and we're just asking that you affirm this today. So you'll recall that last January, you held a goal-setting discussion in the Bascom-Tykeson room as your first meeting back from the winter break. And at that time, you all agreed that you would do that coming out of each winter break prior to the start of a calendar year. And so this year, that date would be Monday, January 9th in the evening for a 4-hour work session. We'd just like to affirm that.
Recorded or not recorded?
You're asking for approval? That's,
Televised and recorded.
Letting you,
Televised or not televised?
are you asking that question?
Yeah.
It would be televised by Metro TV. Last year, the format didn't really lend itself to, it would be hard to follow. But if that's what you desire, we can make that happen.
Or just make sure it's on everybody's calendar,
so it
right?
starts at 5:30.
I'd imagine 5:30, it's not set.
Yeah, the January 9th meeting is 7:30, so I'm assuming it would be 5:30.
Yes, we'd add a work session.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all. I did forget to thank LCOG and Metro TV, both for the new sound system because they participated in that, and our new webcast system. So just want to get that in there.
Great to have a little different. Appreciate it a lot. Okay, so that sort of finishes up the business for this meeting. So we might as well go ahead and do the consent calendar.
I move to approve the items on the consent calendar.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councilor Polling.
I'd like to pull item E.
Okay. All right, and so we'll vote on the rest of it then. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 in favor and none in opposition. It passes. We go to item E. Councilor Polling.
Yeah, I just want to pull that for a vote. I do not feel that expending city funds on overseas travel for the Sister City program is an appropriate use of money. During the Budget Committee discussions, when we were talking about increasing the funding for the Sister City program, I voted against it. I'll vote against this. I don't think that we should be sending people overseas on these types of trips. Plain and simple. I think we have other projects, other things in this community that we could be spending if we send 2 counselors, that's $5,200. It's not that much when you look at the overall budget. To me, it's more the principle of the thing. And I just can't see approving spending those funds.
Betty?
I think it's our small contribution to international relations, and I think it's very, very worthwhile.
Guess I would just add to this conversation for just a second right here is that we are, because of I think we talked about this, because of the additional funds that you allocated, and a lot of our sister cities are in the process of some transitions, that they're going to take a look at the whole program and bring it. I think they'll keep you informed and bring together the folks who are engaged in the Sister City program and figure out how we might make the best use of the funds that we have. Is that adequate comment on that?
Yes, with additional funding, it's time to revisit the program and make sure that we're allocating it in a way that makes sense and aligns with the conversation you had in the spring.
Yeah. All right, so I think we're ready to vote on E. All those in, oops.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Mike.
Yes,
I
Mike.
just apologize. This is a very narrowly construed item, as I understand it, and it doesn't affect the regular council expenditure opportunities of travel within the continental United States that we do, what, twice a year? Isn't that what we process agreed to before?
That's right.
And it's separate than that?
Yes.
It's okay.
Hey, your agreements say if it's if it's overseas travel, then the council needs to approve that in a session or in a meeting.
Okay, ready to vote? All those in favor, please indicate.
What's the, what,
It is the approval of the overseas travel request. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In opposition, 1. It passes. Thank you. So now I guess the only thing I would do is remind you that next Monday is the public forum at South Eugene High School at 6 o'clock.
Sign-in starts at 5:30, and the comments will begin, sign-in starts at 6. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Sign-in starts at 5:30, and the comments will begin at 7.
And it's, so you want it, would you?
It's at
mind-
South Eugene High School.
And the reason for the forum is?
So this is an opportunity for the public to come and comment on the process by which neighborhoods develop area plans or plans. And so it's a process, we're offering an opportunity for the public to come comment on process, not any former proposals for South Willamette specifically. And I just want to add that we will also provide an opportunity for folks to video their comment prior to the start of the meeting in the event that they can't stay for the meeting the entire night.
how does it start?
They sign up, they can start signing up
I'm
at
making my question
5:30, but it
myself.
doesn't begin until 6? What does it say?
Okay.
We'll send it to you.
I would like to email it to you again. I would prefer to email it and confirm.
Right. I just want to be sure it's on your calendar from next Monday.
At
Okay.
South Eugene High School.
So we'll adjourn until our meeting at 7:30.